Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad to see so many faces and so many friends we've had here and students from Catawba. I'm John Ware, Executive Director of the Center for the Environment. You know, each year, up until COVID, we've held right here on Catawba campus a National Environmental Summit where we bring students from all over the nation to the college to learn about sustainability, but especially how to be leaders and people that collaborate and people that work in teams and understand how to make change. But you know, it's one thing I think that occurred to me and others more recently, and that has been that we might be skipping one part, because we teach these kids about how to deal with the issues like climate change, and maybe, but have we been looking at how we deal with the feelings that you have of possible hopelessness and despair that are associated with things like climate change, which is so serious? And, you know, that is something we now have to deal with. And it's just in the recent years, it's been the first times I've noticed a real change in students that have a real concern about this. And I see some faculty shaking their heads that have seen it in their classrooms, and I've seen it in mine. But it really brings to a point why what you're about to hear tonight is so important. Why we all need to be thinking about this, and what impact that a book like the book we're about to hear about has and can have on our public. So tonight you're going to hear from Heather White. And I do want to say with our Environmental Summit, Heather has been a partner with us for many years. She's made an effort as a volunteer to come up here and help us make that a truly outstanding summit each year. And I also want to say, I'm looking around the room and I see a lot of faculty and individuals that are also have been players and important in that. And I want to thank all of you that are here, which I think is about every faculty that I see in the room. But at this time, I do want to say, Heather, you know, she's one of those people that has been a change maker from the get-go. I mean, and she has a personality that makes it just a good fit because she's so darn likable. She's an environmental lawyer. She's now a writer, and has been a writer, but has a book out. She's a consultant. She's worked as a motivational speaker, nonprofit executive, and a former Senate staffer. And she has more than 20 years experience in nonprofit management, policy advocacy. When I got to know her, she was executive director of the Environmental Working Group, which is one of the nation's largest environmental organizations. And then she went on from there to head up a program where they were combining two different nonprofits, which ultimately became one, and she was the new executive director for that, which was Yellowstone Forever. And more recently, she has started another organization, which I believe you're going to discuss a little bit at some point tonight. She has also, by the way, served as a counsel on energy and environment to United States Senator Russell Feingold and an associate with Bass, Berry, and Sims Law Firm in the past. One unusual thing, and Heather actually gets on, somehow you manage to get on TV all the time. I'm not sure how you've done it, but she's been named one of the top 100 women in wellness by Mind Body Green, and a recipient of the Women in Sustainability Leadership Awards. And you're on Good Morning America, Friday? So you can tune in. She serves on the board of a lot of nonprofits, several, and she's appeared on PBS, NBC News, CBS, Fox News, MSNBC, and cited in national outlets such as the Washington Post, New York Times, The Guardian, on a wide range of climate and policy issues. It's at this point, I think I'm going to ask her to come up and we'll hear about her new book, One Green Thing.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you everybody for being here tonight in person. It is so exciting to see you in 3 dimensions and not just on a computer screen. Actually, last time I did an event with Catawba, it was February of last year, which Nino was part of a panel that I had with students about eco-anxiety, which is the mental health impacts of climate change, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. But before I talk about that, I want to read, because this is a book reading from my new book, One Green Thing, Discover Your Hidden Power to Help Save the Planet. So I'm going to read from one of my favorite chapters. And this is chapter 13, and it's called Think Beyond Your Age. Realize an intergenerational partnership. Like sands through the hourglass, leaning into our legacy. Grandma, turn it up. The AC unit is so loud I can't hear. I don't want to miss the opening. I yelled to my great-grandma Mary in the early afternoon, right as her soap operas were about to start. I was 8 years old, and spending time with her was the highlight of my summer vacation. As a special treat, she let me watch her stories with her. She was partial to guiding light, but every now and then we watched Days of Our Lives. The famous introduction states, like sands through the hourglass, so are the days of our lives. Even now it gives me a thrill when I hear the opening. And I'm not alone either. The show has pledged to give the iconic hourglass to the Smithsonian's National American History Museum. I remember how excited I'd get when the show started. What person would come back from the dead? Who had faked a coma? Who had a long-lost identical twin? Imagine my delight when these same themes emerged as I was playing a mystery video game with my younger daughter, Susan. I realized she'd never watched soap operas, so I explained the tropes and we giggled. Like my memories with my great-grandma, I hope one day Susan will recall yelling "objection" with me while playing virtual courtroom dramas. Sometimes seemingly trivial moments can spark delight and remind you of someone you love. Creating these experiences across generation gives meaning to our personal lives, but they can also positively impact our shared future. And the reason I wanted to start with this chapter is the importance of us thinking about the legacy that we want to leave and how we can work with other generations to create a more positive, regenerative future. So much of what we talk about in the climate crisis is scary, and it is. The extreme weather events that many of us have already experienced. I live in Montana, where wildfires are becoming more and more common. For those of you who have family and friends in California, you may recall in 2020 when the skies of San Francisco turned to orange. If you have family and friends in Louisiana, you know about Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Harvey, and the recent hurricanes as well. Last summer, we saw flooding in New York and New Jersey, and the future is scary and it's uncertain. But one of the reasons I wrote this book is for us to remind ourselves that when we work together, we can create something beautiful. We need to lean into the possibility for a greener and healthier future. So one of the things I'd like for you to do in this book, and actually this book, it is number 3 right now on new releases in climatology, which I'm excited about, but it's also really weird because the book is actually a self-help book for the environment. Because what I want everyone to be able to do is to see themselves in this movement. You don't have to have a PhD in anything, although we love the PhDs and there's a lot of them in this room. But you don't have to have a PhD in anything. You don't have to be a technocrat. You don't have to be a scientist to be part of the environment. If you care about the future, and if you care about the next generation, this is an invitation for you to get involved. So what I'd like to do is just do an exercise that I have in the book. It's a different chapter. It's actually in the first part of the book. And I'm going to ask you to just take a minute right now. And I want you to think about someone in your past. They could be a family member. It could be someone that you never met if you don't know a lot about your family history, who created an incredible opportunity for you. This doesn't have to be related to the environment, but someone who's important to you. And then I would like for you to take just a minute and reach out to someone and tell them about that person. And yes, this is an interactive book reading. And you're not going to be graded on it, but literally just share a memory. This is actually a Ghanaian tradition. It's called Sankofa. It's going from the past and bringing something forward. And you don't have to share you're not sharing with me, you're sharing with someone who's next to you. We'll just take a minute to do that.
Yeah, I see her. Just noticed that. That's great.
We'll just take about another minute. Okay, so I'm going to bring everybody back after that short trip down memory lane and the sharing opportunity. And the reason I do this exercise in the book is that after you do this exercise and you think about someone who is really important to you in your past, I talk about my grandmother, of course, and watching soap operas with her, my great-grandma, watching soap operas with her. The second thing I do is ask you to think about someone you've never met who created an incredible opportunity for you. And for me, I think immediately about Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who created an opportunity for me to be able to participate in democracy. My kids are named Katie and Susan after those two amazing women. So that's what comes to mind for me. And then in the book, what I do is I ask you to take a couple minutes and envision 2030 and think about what a positive, regenerative, greener, healthier world could look like. Rooftop gardens, beautiful green buildings and design like we have here at the Center for the Environment, this idea of access to opportunities with clean energy and renewable energy. What could that world look like? And then after that visualization, I ask you to imagine it's 2050 and you are sitting down and talking with a teenager that you are related to, and you are the ancestor. What are they going to thank you for? What opportunity did you create for them? And what will they wish you had known? And that's the entry point that I try to use in this discussion with respect to climate action. Because this issue is so overwhelming, most people don't know where to start. And the reason I wrote this book, although as John knows and Meg Dees and all these familiar faces that I see in this room know, I've been thinking about it for a while. The reason I wrote this book is because of my kids. In 2019, my older daughter, Katie, named after Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Katie, she decided she wanted to be part of the Greta Thunberg-inspired 2019 climate strike. And I'm an environmentalist. I've been doing this for such a long time. I said, sure, no problem, but we live in Montana, and there was going to be a thunderstorm. And that's actually pretty rare in Montana. And she had a really heavy backpack and a trumpet with her, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to pick you up, and I'll drive you to the protest sites. You can just drop your backpack and your heavy trumpet, and you won't get rained on. And she was so offended that, first of all, I was going to pick her up for a walkout, right? And the whole point of this action for these young people was to like walk out of school, right? Even though they had permission. And then I was gonna use a car to drive her to a climate protest, which was all about renewable and clean energy. She was so upset that at the dinner table, she just had to say, Mom, Dad, what is going on? This can't all be on our shoulders. Where is Generation X? Where are the baby boomers? Where are the millennials? I am so sick and tired of hearing all this praise. You all love Greta and you love all these, 13 and 14-year-olds that are starting new sustainable companies. I'm sick and tired of hearing about it. What are you doing to make sure that I am not alone and that we are not alone? And her younger sister was like, yeah, what she says. And what was so interesting for me is that I literally have worked on Capitol Hill on climate policy. I ran an nonprofit environmental working group. I ran the nonprofit partner to Yellowstone. My husband does grizzly bear conservation. This is our career, but I realized I had to step up my game. And I had to dig into the mental health impacts of the climate crisis, what our young people were feeling about the future that they're inheriting, and that I also needed to create an opportunity for more people to see themselves in the movement. And since that workshop in February, Nina, that you were part of, where we talked about eco-anxiety and how young people are feeling, there's been all kinds of new research since last February. In last September, there was a survey of 10,000 young people, ages 16 through 25. 1 out of 4 do not want to have children because they're so worried about the climate crisis. For nearly half, climate anxiety, concern about the future and extreme weather events interferes with their daily life. Just last week, 4-H, and I know that you all know 4-H. 4-H, 83% of the kids in a 4-H 4-H survey worry about the climate crisis and do not think adults are doing enough to move us into action and to a better future. And the Oxford English Dictionary has included the term eco-anxiety in the dictionary. So more and more people are connecting the dots between how our young people are feeling and what our future and our uncertain future that we have. Okay, that's great, Heather. You did all that research, well, now what? Like, where's the invitation? So here's the invitation. What I've created is like a Myers-Briggs personality test, or an Enneagram, or a Strength Finders for service. So in the book, and it's available on onegreenthing.org, you take an assessment. And the question is, how do you show up for the people you love? Who are you when you're in service to others? I have 7 different profiles, 7 different archetypes, however you want to think about it. The first is the adventurer, which Dr. Ware is. And the adventurer is the person who loves the physicality of the outdoors, is a calculated risk taker, really believes in taking other people outside their comfort zone. The second is a beacon. And I know there are several beacons in this room. And the beacon is the person who's focused on social justice, really comfortable being at the podium right here, testifying or having the bullhorn and getting people to a rally. The third is the influencer. And the influencer is all just about people, people, people. That's their motto. That's what they want to do and how they show up for others. Then there's the philanthropist, which is like a really, really big name, and most people think about the Monopoly guy with the monocle, but that's not what I'm talking about. It's the giver. The giver, the person who shows up by rounding up others, by donating time and resources, and that's how they show up for the people they love. And then there is the sage, which is focused on the spirituality of nature and the ethics and the morality of creating this better future for the next generation. Then there's the spark, which a lot of people really appreciate when they read this book. The spark is the person who says, sure, I'm in. I'll go with you to that rally. I'll go with you to the documentary. I'm happy. Yeah, sure, I'll sign that petition. The spark is the cheerleader that cheers friends and family on. And then finally, there's the wonk. And the wonk loves the science and the data and the policies. And here's the thing. In the environmental movement, we're pretty wonky. A lot of times when people talk to me about climate solutions, I immediately start talking about how excited I am about microgrids and how microgrids are an incredible opportunity for us. And oh my gosh, all these college campuses are doing it, and eyes just like glaze over. And so one of the things we need to do is to try to develop all these different aspects of who we are in order to create an invitation for more people to come in to the movement. So you take this assessment, you find out what your profile is, and then I encourage you to do something that is very simple, but also radical. And that is a One Green thing, a daily practice of sustainability. And I come up with a plan, like a fitness plan, like a fitness plan or a wellness plan. It's a 21-day plan where you do one thing based on your strengths, on your talents, on what you're interested in. You do one thing for the environment every day. But here's the thing. For me, I love calling my member of Congress. And I'll tell you, my member of Congress in Montana does not share my values. Like, it's just, we don't agree on anything. But I love leaving him voicemail messages and writing him letters because that's his job. But for other people, that may not be comfortable that's not where you want to show up. For other people, you may want to work on campus sustainability and talk about the opportunities for more renewable energy on campus. Or you may want to take a walk outside in this beautiful preserve and just take a moment to reflect and connect. But your One Green thing is your One Green thing. And here's the big question I get, right? Because I live with now a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old. And for those of you who have teenagers, you may, like me, get a lot of feedback. And I get a lot of feedback at home. It's kind of like if for those of you fans of Calvin and Hobbes, you may remember where Calvin comes to his dad and he's like, hey dad, your poll numbers are really slipping lately. But sometimes my poll numbers fluctuate a lot in the house. But one of the things I get from my kids is individual action. Why does that even matter? Obviously, we need huge policy and climate solutions. And here's why it matters. It's not an either-or proposition. We have to bring more people in with a daily practice of sustainability, not because of the carbon footprint. It's not. It's not because Heather White's skipping the straw, Heather White being a vegan. If all of us in this room decided to have solar panels on our house, we would not solve the climate crisis. But our daily practice and our daily action can shift the culture. And it's time for a culture change. We need that culture change. We're seeing it with young people. They demand it, but we need to be in partnership with them to help with that culture change. And that's where our individual actions and this daily practice adds up. So these big policy and market solutions can be adopted at scale. So we can build that momentum to get that support for them to become reality. So with that, I'm going to read another chapter. And this is actually chapter 1. More than 25 years ago, hurts to say that, but it's true. More than 25 years ago, I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro while spending a summer studying international environmental law in Nairobi, Kenya. I boarded a bus to Arusha, Tanzania, then started my trek up the famous 19,340-foot mountain. I wasn't a climber. I was a policy geek, which is my nice way of saying I wasn't physically fit. I could write killer legal memos, though. Kilimanjaro is a different type of climb. It's basically a walk. The guides told us to go slowly, to acclimate to the lack of oxygen at higher elevations. My classmates and I relished the journey as we enjoyed the views, took pictures, and laughed. A group of ultra-fit British women were making the climb with another tour company. I'm just gonna say that one more time. A group of ultra-fit British women were making the climb with another tour company. They always asked us how long it took us to get to the next hut, which was our destination each evening after an all-day hike. I remember one hiker laughed at us and said, I cannot believe how slow you are. And I can't do a very good British accent, but I just want you to feel what that would sound like with a British accent. I cannot believe how slow you are. We didn't know these women. And why did they care how long it was taking us? It's not as though our pace was impeding their progress. Eventually, we reached the top of the mountain, Uhuru Peak. On our way down, we learned that none of the Brits had reached the summit. Altitude sickness overcame them. They'd rushed to each hut, but didn't let their bodies adapt to the oxygen-starved air. As my Southern mama would say, bless their hearts. I remember thinking that some people assume environmentalists have a similar attitude to those British hikers. You don't belong here because you don't care enough. don't know enough and don't understand the issues the way we do. My colleagues in the environmental movement are nothing like this, but many people have an understandable fear of being judged for doing sustainability wrong. Then there's the enormity of the climate crisis itself. Heat waves in the Pacific Northwest, tragic fires throughout the West, hurricanes and floods in the Southeast, melting glaciers, and rapid species extinction around the world. How do we even begin? And so this shame, this concern of doing sustainability wrong is what we really need to break through as a movement. We need to make sure that people understand that everyone is welcome, everyone is needed in this movement, and we all have a unique role to play. If you are a philanthropist, you don't have to be the wonk. If you are the sage, you do not have to be the adventurer. But we all have an opportunity to develop these different aspects of who we are and based on our strengths and to learn and to grow. And so we can think about that very fancy term, intergenerational partnership, which I like to call think beyond your age, to make sure that we're all working together, breaking through that political rancor and focusing on the legacy that we can leave and the life that we want the people that we love and what I call future loved ones, the people that we love that we haven't met yet, but we love them. What type of world can we create with them? So thank you all so much. I look forward to my Q&A with John and I hope you enjoy the book. Thank you.
I've got my first question for you is, when we do think about things like eco-anxiety, what do you do personally to build hope for the future?
I have two answers to that. I'm a lawyer by training, so it's really hard for me to have like one answer for something, so just bear with me. So the first answer is I really do try to lean into my sage. I do. I'm a wonk philanthropist, like I'm a giver, but I also love all the data and everything. But the sage part, I really try to focus on the spiritual connection to nature and the idea of being a steward and caring for this world that gives so much to us. So that's the first thing, and I find a lot of comfort in that. Yeah. The second thing I do is lean into my wonk, and I read all those papers about the climate solutions.
Right.
We have all the technology. But what's missing is the political will, and I know we can do it.
Yes. One of the things that got us all excited, many of us in this room that are faculty, was creating that environmental summit. And part of that was to look at ways students could use their talents and abilities, but often they're hidden. How can we What does someone need to do to begin to delve in and understand what powers they have that can help be used to solve these issues?
I love that question, John. And I think, I talked about the assessment. I think that's an invitation to think about your strengths in service and how you show up for the people you love. There's all kinds of great journal prompts too. Not only visualization about what could the future look like if we build it together, but I think the key answer, even though of course I'll be like, there's lots of resources in the book, but the key answer is to create time. Whether it's prayer, whether it's meditation, whether it's journaling, take some time and be intentional and reflect on how you want to show up. And I think that because we're so busy and there's so much going on, and oh my gosh, the pandemic and all of the pain and the heartache we've been through collectively, it's important to create that time and be intentional to try to lean into that hope and think about what do we want to do with this wild and precious time that we have.
Right. And another question, and in a moment we're going to get to questions from the audience. But often with my students, I've had cases where the student comes to me and they talk about the fact their thinking is so different from their parents, that their parents really don't understand what's going on in the world. And And I find it intriguing because you just talked about intergenerational partnerships. And I think one of the things that young people probably do need to understand is how to utilize intergenerational partnerships to create change. Could you?
I'm so glad you asked
Talk
this
about
question because I meant to talk about it because
Yeah.
it's really important. Because you were saying young people need to understand how to use intergenerational partnership, but we need to understand how to listen to young people. There are a lot of great resources out there about how to teach kids about climate change. I'm telling you all, they know. No matter where they are on the political spectrum, they know that the future is uncertain, and they know that primarily our energy choices are causing it. They do know that. And so in the book, I have a great way for us to create space to listen. We really do need to listen for them. And here's the other thing we need to do about the partnership. And that's why we have this exercise about thinking about our ancestors and the people who created these amazing opportunities for us. We need to tell them the stories of the change that we've seen. For example, and this is where I get wonky and nerdy, but I'm in an okay crowd for that. For example, the ozone hole. In 1987, there was an international treaty called the Montreal Protocol. There was a huge hole in the ozone layer. We banned chlorofluorocarbons, and it has repaired itself. Now, we still have a whole lot of stuff to do, but that is huge change. We've also seen a major change in women participating in democracy. Whatever it is that you've personally witnessed, my mom grew up in East Tennessee, right near Chattanooga. Chattanooga, she had to use her windshield wipers in the middle of the day when she was visiting family and friends because of all the soot, because the Clean Air Act hadn't been enacted. But now Chattanooga is this amazing, if you all haven't been there, please go. It's amazing, it's beautiful. There's so much sustainability going on there. So we need to tell these kids these stories because they don't necessarily know and they aren't necessarily taught it. So I think it's this twofold thing of making sure we're creating a space where young people can share their fear and their worry, but we're also letting them know not only is there hope, but hope is one of these, we're not really sure, how do you describe it, what is it? But we give them examples of what we have witnessed. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Good. One of the things when I read through this book, I noticed, and I think it makes it very distinctive because I haven't seen this, and that is you've got the climate change issue. This is a self-help book. And it's a guide for people that have issues that with what's happening in despair. Tell us a little bit about how that could work in a short way. What's the first thing somebody needs to do, and what kinds of, where's it going to take us? What is it going to be for them?
Okay, great question. Okay. Another great question. So first part of the book is, who are you? What's your legacy? How do you want to show up for the people you love? The second part of the book is, what are you passionate about? So I talk about the importance of compassion and community. I talk about intergenerational partnership, and then I go into clean energy. Here are all these opportunities and all kinds of great solutions. Here are all the policies on Capitol Hill that you need to be aware of. Then I talk about water. Here are the challenges that we have with water. Then I talk about food and how our food is grown and regenerative agriculture. And then I talk about public lands. And the chapter of that is Love Your Mother, Earth, in parentheses. But the idea, and for those of you who are Generation X, you'll know, it's like a choose your own adventure. Choose your own adventure with respect to climate activism, because of course we need the policy changes and we need the market changes, but that only happens when all of us are part of this and all of us are pointing in that right direction.
Right, thank you. She did a good job answering my questions because she didn't know any of those questions were coming. Who in here would have a question?
Yeah.
Yes, Nina.
I have two questions.
Do you want to come to the microphone just so everybody can hear? That'd be great.
Okay, is this good?
Yeah.
So two questions. First, how do your daughters feel now about everything that you've done since their, questioning? And also, what was the book writing process like?
Oh, thank you so much. That's such a great question. So the girls, I'll just tell you, I thought they'd be like, "Way, Mom, we're so proud of you. This is so amazing." And they're like, we've heard about this for a while now. We're glad it's all, but I know that they're proud, but it's more of like, "Oh yeah, that's cool. You said you're going to do it." They've read everything. I do thank them for letting me share our stories and I think that's really important. So they've read every word, and I know they're proud. I just would say there's not a lot of adjectives they use to describe that. And then the second thing about the book writing process, I'll tell you a couple things. So I've been thinking about this for a while, and the pandemic, right, world shut down, created a space for all of us to do a lot of reflection. So I certainly had a lot more empty space on my calendar than I imagined. But one of my big secrets, and this is going to be annoying if you're a college student, but it is true, is I did what's called the Pomodoro method. I legit set a timer. I had my book deal, I had a deadline, I wrote for 25 minutes, I took a 5-minute break. I wrote for 25 minutes, I took a 5-minute break. And once I had enough hours in, I got to take a 30-minute break. And I wrote the book in 4.5 months, which was a really fast time. So I got the book deal last April, right after our talk in February. And then, here it is, April 19th. Yesterday was the day that it went. It's out in the world.
Yeah, and just a comment, you talked about our talk. You might want to just tell people about that, because I think some people may, after they listen to the lecture tonight, want to go back and listen to the eco-anxiety discussion that we we recorded, and it was with students. And
yeah, it's on the Center for the Environment website. So last February, we had a Zoom conversation where we had a psychologist here at Catawba talking from her perspective as a psychologist, and we had 3 students on our panel, and then me talking about this idea of the climate crisis and the anxiety that young people have and how we could get involved. And a lot of the themes from that talk, if you read the book, it'll sound very familiar. So it was a wonderful way for me to really think and kind of pull all that together for the book.
Yeah. Next question. Anybody? Well, if you can come down to the mic.
Is that great. Maggie D's? Okay, I'm trying. This is my amazing intern, Maggie D's, who of course you all know, and I'm trying not to cry. Oh my gosh, I'm trying not to cry. Okay. This is like the surprise guest. This is your life surprise guest.
Hi. So I've obviously learned a lot getting to intern with you. So how would you recommend finding the balance between the overwhelm of the anxiety, but then also still sort of having that fire underneath you to keep working towards climate solutions and keep caring about it instead of becoming I'm gonna do this and it's gonna be okay. How do you recommend finding the balance between those two things?
Good question.
Wow. Yeah, let me think about that for a minute. Oh my gosh, it's so great to see you, and thank you for all of your help. Maggie was there when I said, hey, I think I'm going to do an assessment. Huh, what do you think? And she was like, oh yeah, here's some ideas. So thank you for being part of this whole process, Maggie. I think what I would say as far as that balance of knowing that we are all in this together, and this is the biggest challenge of our time, and it is the biggest challenge of our time. How do we balance that? And I think this idea of a daily practice is important, because some days you may want to be at a climate protest. Some days you maybe want to testify before Congress, and some days you may want to spend some time in the garden, just gardening, but just trying to create some space for you to maybe, on the anxiety side, lean into what I call the sage, right? The moral, ethical, spiritual aspect of compassion and care for the earth and care for community. And then on other days, you may want to get up and go. So I think gosh, I sound like such a mom. I realize I sound like such a mom because I am. One of the things I really encourage young people to do, and you probably do it on your phone now, is the practice of journaling. And that's just because it's a way of putting your thoughts and feelings down on paper, but maybe you do in phone notes now, I'm not sure. But I think that could really help Maggie too.
Mm-hmm. Next question,
yeah.
Yes.
Love the book, love the lecture, took the assessment, it was great. What struck me with your presentation today was the thing that you said about you're a representative in Montana and you do not share the same values, but that didn't seem to stop you from calling and doing emails. Where do you get the willpower to do that?
Oh gosh, wow. So the willpower to keep taking action to someone who is not going to do what you're asking them to do. 2 answers to that. The first is because it's his job to listen to me. And that's right in my gut. And I'm like, I'm making you do your job. And if it's not you, it's your staff. And that is what you get paid my tax dollars to do. And I also think it's very important for my member of Congress, Matt Rosendale is his name. I think it's important for him to know that Montana is not a monolith and that we're filled, even in a state with only 1 million people, with a lot of different viewpoints. And that is an important service. He may not feel it that way, that I'm providing him. So I think that's important, and that gives me the will. I'd also say that stems from my experience on the Gore campaign in 2000. And being a recount attorney, I was in Florida for 30 of the 36 days, and I know 562 votes make a huge difference in the trajectory of the country. Even if you have a different political viewpoint, you know that after that experience. So I think I know how important it is for me. The other question, though, that I think kind of stems to what I hear, like one of my daughter Katie, who was in the book a lot, one of the things she did the other day is she shared on social media a photo of a Nigerian oil spill, okay? And then she said, skipping the straw today, doing my part. Totally sarcastic, right? Completely making fun of that whole campaign. And I said to her, I'm like, you're 16 and you live in Bozeman, Montana. Are you gonna call the Nigerian embassy? Like, what are you gonna do? And actually, this whole like anti-single-use plastic campaign helped build a global consensus, and just last month, the United Nations said there's gonna be an international treaty dealing with single-use plastic. So you do matter, it's easy to forget, but we've gotta have the policy solutions. We have to have the market solutions. But part of it is we have to start talking about our common values, and then going back to that other question about my representative, he needs to know that we do have common values, but it's just the policy choices may be a little different, but we do have common values.
Okay.
Even though I said they're different, they aren't.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Good evening. I've had a long career teaching about the environment. Had 37 years, starting back in the 70s. And when I had a captive audience for a year, I could change minds. I could create people who became environmental lawyers. Now I'm retired. I've been retired for almost 15 years now, the third time. But my interaction at this moment is mainly with a bunch of old men playing golf. And if you've ever thought that you had a difficult audience to bring about change with, I play golf with 120 old men and we got 190 different opinions. Normally when they find out I was a biology and environmental educator and I hear, you don't believe that environmentalist, yes I do. And I usually have about a 1 minute window to try to bring about change. So my question to you is, as a lawyer, how do you bring about change when people don't even believe in environmental destruction and environmental change, and global warming is just a cyclic thing, it's been hot before? What's your strongest argument you could put together in about a 1 minute spiel to help people at least think about the possibility?
So this is where we need to workshop some. I'll tell you what my response is, but I need to work on my delivery a little bit. But I say, whether or not you believe in climate change, that's not relevant. In my view, it's a scientific fact, and it's not necessarily my view, it's a scientific fact, but whether or not you believe in it isn't relevant. Let's start talking about climate solutions. What do you think about solar? What do you think about wind? Do you want your grandson or granddaughter to be working in a coal mine? Like, is that the future that you want for them? Like there's nothing wrong with, of course, I live in Montana. Butte, Montana electrified the world with copper mining, but it is literally a Superfund site. The whole town is. And you can see the environmental sacrifice that our ancestors made so we can live the life that we lead. So I think trying to talk about solutions where you think the person may have an interest in, whether it's a renewable energy, whether it's talking about wildlife conservation. I'm from Tennessee. My uncle used to be a taxidermist. I'm not even joking. He was a taxidermist. We have so much in common when it comes to wildlife conservation, when it comes to the need for land trusts, when it comes to the need for conservation easements. We differ on our views on gun policy. It does. But we can find that common ground, but it may need to be really specific and really micro. But ultimately, whether or not they believe in the climate crisis, I don't waste much time because it's happening, and I think I need to talk about the solutions that I think will appeal to them. That's been my approach to folks. Now, I don't golf with you, so that may sound really, optimistic and a little Pollyanna-ish, but I've been able to, when I drill down on specific issues, water, for example, I've been able to find some common ground with people who don't politically necessarily agree with me.
I think that is a brilliant solution. You cannot change people's minds in 1 to 2 minutes.
No.
Make them think about, I love that.
Yeah.
Make them think about their role, what's going to happen to their grandchildren.
Right. What do they want for them? I mean, yeah.
And you just changed mine.
Oh, I'm so glad, because I think that's really important, because we all get, and the political rancor, like, really, do you really want them to be in a mine? I mean, obviously, it's an important, I'm from East Tennessee, obviously I spent a lot of time in Kentucky, like, I'm not saying there's anything wrong, there's no shame with that at all, but we've grown. There's other opportunities. These are renewable energy jobs are so exciting. Like, one of the things that Project Drawdown says, which I highly recommend, a great nonprofit, is that every job is a climate job. If you're an artist, if you're a teacher, if you're a scientist, we're all going to need to be thinking about this beautiful world that we could create. It's not just stopping the heartache and the pain, which there's going to be a lot of that. It's we can, and the window is closing, which the United Nations likes to remind us every other week, the window is closing. But there is an opportunity to create something really beautiful.
May I do a little follow-up statement?
Yeah.
I want to say, and see what you're saying. I cannot teach you the science in 2 minutes,
Yeah.
but I may get you to at least consider the possibilities.
I love that. I think that's a great approach.
I get it almost a day.
Yeah. And don't waste your time with that, because it actually literally doesn't matter, because it is a scientific fact, so it doesn't matter.
Hey, I've got an alternate idea.
And how are we doing on time? Because I'll talk for a really long time.
Take one of these young people, maybe even in the room, golfing with you, and let those passionate young people tell those old timers.
Yeah.
Okay, next question.
One more question, yes.
One more question. Yes.
Cool. My question is kind of like,
Do you mind coming to this mic so everybody can hear? I think that one, is it on? Can you all hear? Or is it may just be? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
okay, mine's kind of like the opposite of his question. Because like, as you mentioned with young people, there's not really much of a debate whether climate change is an actual issue, regardless of where you fall. We all kind of agree that it's happening. But how would you deal with climate doomerism? Like the people who are like, the climate's changing, it's awful, but like, we can't do anything. Because it makes me really, really sad as someone who cares about the environment so much. But it's like, once you get in that spiral of like negativity and just kind of like loathing for humanity, how do you get them out of it?
Oh my gosh. So the New York Times did a great piece on this called OK Doomer. For those of you who know, like OK Boomer, it was called OK Doomer, and it was all about all these climate reports that are, I mean, they're true, but like the United Nations is like code red for humanity, an atlas of human suffering. These are the quotes that we get, and it's hard to be like, okay, cool, yeah. Well, I think what we need to do in the environmental community, but also to remind each other is share the positive climate news, the big, amazing things that can happen, and remind people of all of the opportunities. I will say, no matter where you fall on the political spectrum, the reality is the Build Back Better legislation, the aspects of it that were part of this infrastructure bill are huge when it comes to green buildings and green design. So there is a lot of money coming across the country that is going to help put us on the right path when it comes to clean energy, mass transportation, and all these amazing, exciting things. But we have to, on all of us, and I'm saying that we, I mean, I think it means Gen X and baby boomers, but we need to help make sure that you all are getting the information about all of the exciting technology. But we have the technology, we have the solutions. You know, we don't have to wait for nuclear fusion to work. We have the solutions. We know we need to have to shift to renewable energy. We know we need to stop cutting down forests in developing countries for agriculture. We know what we need to do. What is missing is the political will, and that's where our individual action comes in. And then Josh comes up as the next thing? Okay.
In closing, and then we're going to have someone come up. When I read through this book, one thing really came to mind, and it was a person I'd met early in the 90s that was a speaker at a conference I attended, and his name was Dwayne Elgin. And he wrote a book entitled Voluntary Simplicity, and I found a lot of good information in that book. But one statement he makes, I think, really fits this book and what you're trying to accomplish. Dwayne's quote, "The character of a whole society is the cumulative result of the countless small actions day in and day out of millions of persons."
Absolutely.
And I think when we look and each do little things, we actually do a lot if we all do it together. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be back. Thank you. Thank you so much.